gotta cry, Argentina. Argentina is taking increasingly dramatic measures to rescue its economy. First, it asked the IMF to push forward financial assistance to the tune of $50 billion. By the way, it may not be enough, which they had already agreed to earlier in the year. Now the central bank has also raised the key interest rate. To say it's significant is an understatement. It was already by far the highest in the world at 45%. Now it's gone to a staggering 60%. It really does leave you speechless. The local currency, the peso, hit a record low despite that against the US dollar after plunging by nearly a fifth earlier Thursday. Now, President Mauricio Macri acknowledged the challenges ahead.
Last week, there were new expressions highlighting a lack of confidence in the markets, especially concerning our capacity to obtain funding for 2019.
I am joined now by Alberto Ramos. He is the head of Latin American research at Goldman Sachs. We are very lucky to have you here during such a busy time, especially for Argentina. I mean, what is at stake here now for Argentina? I mean, I said earlier today, they're not knocking on the IMF's door. They are now pounding on it.
That's right. Well, this is a fundamental and a sentimental issue. There are, key macroeconomic imbalances. The fundamentals of Argentina are weak. It's a vulnerable country, very large external funding needs. The root of it is a large fiscal imbalance. It's also sentimental because sentiment is very weak. The external environment facing many emerging markets has deteriorated. They went to the IMF. It doesn't seem to be enough. They are either looking for an augmentation of the program or front-loading the disbursements. The monetary authority has responded in a very decisive way. They hiked rates to 60%. They increased reserve requirements in order to deliver a liquidity squeeze. But what we need now, it's a signal, a very clear policy response from the fiscal authorities. They need to redouble the commitment to accelerate fiscal consolidation.
That fiscal response will come with pain on the streets throughout Argentina. It's interesting because the advice seems to be, you don't waste a good crisis. You're actually advising the Argentinian government to go further with a lot of this the fiscal changes in policy.
That is right. You are also absolutely right. This is painful from an economic, from a social, from a political standpoint, but it's not the case that we are in an economic and financial heaven, and in doing so, we'll transition into a financial and economic hell. We are already there. We're just choosing the option and the path that is least costly for the Argentines. This is part of the adjustment from the legacy of the populist experiment that preceded this administration. So we needed to adjust, and not doing so, that would not stabilize markets, that would not anchor sentiment. I can guarantee you that the recession will be much deeper in not doing the fiscal adjustment that is so badly needed.
But on the streets, to Argentines, it's a hard sell, and they have been through so much already. What's gone wrong here? Mauricio Macri, he was kind of ushered into office with such hope here, and seemed to not just be saying the right things, but doing the right things.
That is right. This is a market-friendly, orthodox administration. This is a legacy issue. This administration did not create the imbalances that they're trying to manage and correct. They bet initially on a very gradual strategy of fiscal adjustment that would take several years. They were betting on the kindness of strangers, basically in the market, that would be able to continue to fund these very large fiscal deficits for years in a row. That backfired at some point. They went to the IMF, which is another stranger. They are, at the mercy of the kindness of the IMF. It doesn't seem to be enough now. That's why it is important that the IMF just funds their problem. No, they have to work on their problem. The IMF cannot solve their problem. Only the Argentines and their authorities can solve their problem. So they have to shrink the problem. They have to shrink the fiscal deficit so that the funding needs are smaller. And then they do not rely as much as they've been relying either on access to the market or funding from the IMF.
I hate to even use the word if we talk about default. We're not there yet, right?
We're not there yet. The country is not insolvent. The country is fiscally solvent, but the country is highly illiquid. And if that severe illiquidity continues for a while, it could undermine and compromise what is today a solvent country. It's not necessary, but it's not necessarily the case that we're not going to get that. We don't expect to be the case, but we will see.
Yeah, and unfortunately, politics will infect the entire situation with an election next year. Thanks so much for coming in. Really appreciate it as we continue to follow Argentina.